What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Total Takedown. We are talking UFC 288, where we go back over the card, overs and unders. We're looking for extra value on this Saturday's fight card for your sports betting pleasure. Remember, this is Pup Sports Radio. These lines are brought to you and powered by Superbook Sports. Do me a favor and hit me with the like button. Let's get this thing going. First fight of the night has been canceled. Oh, we lost one, everybody. I'm very upset we're not going to see Dos Santos in the cage on Saturday. I had a big bet on him, beat the line move. Not happy at all about that one. So as of now, unless we get a replacement fight in, your first fight of the evening will be Claudio Ribeiro taking on Joseph Ugly Man Holmes. We do have a 1.5 for this fight here. Over is plus 110. The under 1.5 is minus 130. And I would be looking at violence here in this spot. Claudio Ribeiro, this guy hits hard. He's wild. He's reckless. All he does is come forward. Even when I thought it was going to go a little bit longer than we expected in his last fight, his UFC debut, because, two big old power punchers, you get guys grappling sometimes. He still died in the first 30 seconds of the second round. So that under 1.5 just kind of seems to follow Claudio Ribeiro the way that he fights. He's taking on Holmes. Striker versus grappler. Holmes is going to have, maybe more technical striking, but he doesn't really threaten or hurt people on the feet. He's going to need to get this fight to the ground. He's going to need to grapple if he's going to have a shot at winning this one. So I think it's Claudio by knockout on the feet. If he can't get it down to the ground, then it's Holmes on the mat if he can get it there. Definitely an under spot in my opinion. Minus 130 for under 1.5. That'd be the look. Zhalgas Zhumagulov takes on Rafael Estevam in his next fight here. We've got the total set at 2.5. The over 2.5 minus 185. The under 2.5 plus 165. Rafael Estevam is coming off the Dana White's Contender Series. We always know that big jump up. Generally speaking, these guys struggle with it, especially when they get a half-decent experienced fighter in their first fight, as opposed to, a Cam that we all know isn't long for the UFC. Zhalgas falls somewhere in the middle of those two things. He's got a couple fights by split decision, maybe a couple that he should have won, a couple wins on his record that are maybe a little fraudulent. So we really don't know. I think Zhalgas Zhumagulov definitely counts as UFC caliber. I don't see Rafael Estevam just kind of running through him at any rate. So I think we're going to get a 15-minute fight here. Zhalgas should be able to survive, whether or not he's controlling the fight, at least last that long if he's on the losing end of it. I'll say over 2.5, minus 185. Ikram Alyashkov is taking on Phil Hawes in the next one. Over 2.5, plus 175. Under 2.5 is minus 200, so we're definitely looking at violence here. Phil Hawes, this guy has got strong wrestling basics. He's a big physical guy. The gas tank leaves you with some questions, but he's got that death touch if he connects with you early. Ashkram, again, a new UFC fighter here. He's coming off Contender, but he did have an Eagle FC fight between then and now, so he's gotten a little bit more experience. I'm not sold on Ikram and his overall skill set. I'm just really not at this point. I do know he likes to dive on Kimuras and roll for submissions and things like that. Phil Hawes is not a guy that we've seen submitted at the UFC level, so I'm not convinced that's something that he will be able to do. Got different styles of wrestling here. I'm not your foremost expert on wrestling and who's going to be able to win that debate, but my co-host on Monday did say that they felt the American wrestling actually had an advantage, so Hawes may be live, but I do kind of think Ikram's probably got the better gas tank. The later this fight goes, the more concerned I would be with a finish, and I'm honestly kind of surprised we're getting a 2.5 as opposed to a 1.5 with the juice at minus 200 to the under. Feels a little weird and maybe almost a little trappy to me, because if it actually was something the bookies believed was this hard of an under for the 2.5, they would have given us a 1.5 and kind of made you get tricky and pick your over, your under, maybe be wrong and set up the action better that way for themselves. If everyone's piling in hand over fist on this under 2.5, it makes me worry this one's going 15 minutes. That's a little bit tinfoil hatty here for the total takedown. Not usually the way I go with these totals, but I kind of got a feeling this one might last a little bit longer. So I would be looking to kind of buck the narrative, maybe sprinkle on the over 2.5 at plus 175. I'm not overly interested in that fight. I have not had a great read on Phil Hawes. The only time I've really hit it out of the park with Phil was when I bet on Chris Curtis by knockout against him. Beyond that, he's kind of been a bit of an enigma for me, so I'm going to go ahead and pass here. Parker Porter is taking on Braxton Smith. We do have another 1.5, and boy, does this one make sense. The under 1.5 is minus 180. The over 1.5 is plus 160. You know, I tried to make a case for Parker Porter surviving the 1.5 against Jailton Almeida. That was a spot that I thought he's good enough on the ground. He's good enough on the feet. Decently solid when it comes to his defense. I think he can survive on the ground, get back up, and at least drag this thing into the second round and then get me over that half round. Nice plus money opportunity there. You got me once, you're not getting me again. I mean, this Braxton Smith guy, he just has unreal amounts of power. Very sloppy, very low level. I'm not sure how or why he's in the UFC at this point, but what he is somebody who's going to dink people who are suspect on the chin, and that's exactly what Parker Porter is. So I think Braxton Smith is going to go out there and either bomb on Parker Porter early in this fight, and it's going to be like another 2-minute type of highlight reel fight. Otherwise, Parker's going to get him on the mat, and I have no idea what Braxton Smith does on the mat because he's got all of 2 minutes of fight time or fight footage on the internet there. His entire career takes place in about 2 minutes in the cage, so we have no clue what he can do on the ground. I'd be willing to bet that Parker Porter's probably the better submission grappler. I think both guys can finish. We'll say under 1.5 at minus 180. Next up, we got Virna Jandiroba taking on Marina Rodriguez. Another 2.5 here. The over is minus 215. The under 2.5 is plus 190. And with how dangerous these two women are, you would think that I would like to take a stab at that plus money and look under on this thing. You know, we know Marina can take out people on the feet. She's got big power in her hands, lots of volume. You love to see it. Virna, nasty submission game, very dangerous on the ground. And Rodriguez tends to be a little laxed on the ground. She gets taken down. There's no sense of urgency. She doesn't work right back up to her feet immediately. But because of that, I actually think Virna is going to be content to kind of sit on top of her and ride out some of these minutes, maybe not necessarily find that submission. I kind of think Virna by sub is more likely than Marina by KO is in this spot. I do think we're in for a full 15-minute fight. It might even be close, you know, damage and volume versus control time, that kind of thing. I'll say over 2.5 at minus 215 is actually the right side on this one. We've got Rolando Bedoya taking on Khaos Williams. 1.5 for this banger. Over 1.5 is minus 110. We got to pick them. The under 1.5 is minus 110 as well. The way Rolando fights, I got to feel like the 1.5 under makes sense. The problem is, both these guys are stupid durable. I mean, Khaos Williams has been hit with a kitchen sink at the UFC level and still has not buckled. Guy's never been knocked out. Bedoya is not known at the UFC level yet, but he's 14-1 and has not been finished by strikes, I don't believe. I need to actually double check that. I don't think he's been finished. I think that one loss was a decision. I have to go run that back. But he's coming to the UFC level. He's diving in the deep end, taking on a guy like Khaos who has that death touch, and he's a brawler. He comes forward, he mixes in the grappling, he makes you engage with him, and that's kind of setting him up to get punched in the face by a guy like Khaos. I think somebody's going to end up getting finished and going to sleep here, but it would not shock me if it was in the second or the third round after these guys throw down for a bit because they are both extremely durable. It's a Khaos fight, so I'm going to say under 1.5. I'm not flipping this coin. I just want to sit back and watch this one. I think Khaos wins. I think Khaos wins by knockout, but I kind of feel like it's going to be a round 2. Devin Clark taking on Kennedy Nzechukwu. Another 2.5. This one is very close to a pick'em. The over 2.5 is minus 115. The under 2.5 minus 105. So slightly shaded to that over 2.5. I feel like the finish is only coming from the Kennedy side. I've said that before, and I've been very wrong because fighters can always surprise you. But the way Devin Clark fights, it's decision or bust. This guy wants to get on you, grind you up against the fence, slow the pace of the fight down, control you, wear on you, and unless you're Will Knight fighting up at heavyweight for God knows what reason because of a terrible weight management situation, he's not knocking anybody at the UFC level out. I think Kennedy definitely has all the finishing upside. If you're going under, you might as well take Kennedy inside the distance because it's never coming from Clark. I could see Kennedy taking a full 15-minute fight, though, because Devin Clark has shown to be tough. He has shown to be durable. He got his face broken in half and still continued on in that fight and managed to actually win the decision. I'm going to side with that over 2.5 here just because of how tough Devin Clark is. I'm still picking Kennedy to go ahead and get the win. I do think it's another damage versus control situation where Kennedy might win a split or something like that, but I'll say over 2.5 at minus 115. 15. We've got Frevola and Dober. Glorious violence here in this spot. Another 1.5 total. The over 1.5 is -130. The under 1.5 is +110. And I'm very tempted to bet this over. I don't have a total yet, except for I did go ahead and throw Parker Porter and Braxton Smith under 2.5, the alternate line. I threw that in a parlay to help bring the price tag down on some of these big chalky favorites. That's the only total I've played this week. The one that I'm actually really looking at, though, is this one. The over 1.5 at -130 makes a whole lot of sense to me. So Dober, we've seen him get extended, and we've seen him lose 2 grapplers, some of the best grapplers in the division. And that's really it. The guys that go out there and strike with him, they either learn the hard way and they get knocked out, or he has a very good fighting chance on the feet, even if it manages to go the full 15. I think Matt Frevola has to get back to his wrestling chops here. If he comes out here and tries to prove a point, gets in a pissing contest, and wants to stand and bang with somebody like Dober, I think we might see that chin issue pop up yet again. It's not really a chin issue getting knocked out by some of the hardest hitters in the weight class. I'm just saying. I could absolutely see Dober clipping and knocking out Frevola if he decides to go out there and swing. So I kind of think Frevola's going to wrestle. That's going to put Dober on the defensive. We're going to see the second round, and if we get to the second round, we're probably getting over 1.5. -130 over 1.5, I kind of like it. Charles Jourdain is taking on Kron Gracie in the next fight, a 2.5. The over 2.5 +165. The under 2.5 -185. Another couple of guys that are super durable. The only finish loss on Jourdain's record is that round 3 club and sub. Kron Gracie, we just saw him go in his last fight. Now, I say just, but it was a couple of years ago. He got the brakes beaten off him by Cub Swanson for a full 15 minutes. Really showed his grit, his toughness, his heart, his willingness and ability to take damage and stay in the fight. So both these guys more than capable of pushing this up to an over. But with the long layoff for Kron and the grappling inexperience and propensity to make mistakes with Charles Jourdain, I kind of think we're going to see violence in this spot. I kind of think we're going to see an under, because if Kron is doing what he did versus Cub Swanson and just kind of stomping his way around the cage trying to find Charles Jourdain, he's going to get hit with a lot bigger shots than Cub Swanson was hitting him with. We're going to get flying knees. We're going to get spinning heel kicks. Jourdain will make this man die. Kron Gracie, on the other hand, if he gets his mitts on Charles Jourdain, I expect to end up on the ground. And I really think Jourdain's out of his weight class if this thing gets on the ground. So I'll say under 2.5, -185. We've got Diego Lopes up next taking on Movsar. Evloev lines just dropped, so all we've got is money line. I will assume, because it's Movsar, that we'll probably get a 2.5 here on the total. Guys, I really would look at Movsar inside the distance. Now, I need to brush up a little bit on Diego Lopes. I'll be honest, I haven't done my diligence on him. He's a short notice replacement fighter, but coming in short notice against somebody who's got the pace and cardio of Movsar Evloev. Now, he's not always really a finisher. He is a guy that drags people deep into waters and really will just chain grappling style on you for full 15 minutes, but he hits pretty hard, and he's actually got a decent submission game when he chooses to go to it. I could see a short notice fighter like Diego doing real well in like maybe the first round, hanging on for dear life in the second, and then dying in the third round once he's out of gas and being taken down for the 47th time. So I'm picking Movsar to win this one. Obviously, he's in my big old chalky parlay I mentioned. I think we'll see a 2.5. I don't know how Diego Lopes finishes Movsar Evloev. I really don't. In fact, I think it's like a 1% probability. So don't bother with an under. If you're going to play under, Movsar inside the distance would be the way to look. Xiaonan taking on Jessica Andrade. We have another 2.5. The over is -170. The under is +150. The over in this fight does make some sense here to me. I know with women's MMA, it's almost like they're showing their hand a little bit. When we get these shorter numbers on women that can finish, think Jillian Robertson, for instance, where you get to pick them on the under 1.5. Like, those are the ones where the bookies think this thing is going under, and you might as well bet it that way because everybody knows it's going that direction. This one's a little bit interesting, though, because Andrade, she could beat Jan up on the feet for a full 15 minutes, and we could go 15. Jan is tough enough to take that beating on the feet and go a full 15. Andrade has struggled with the grappling. Xiaonan has been working really hard on her wrestling chops. I'm not sure her submission game is quite where Blanchfield's is. I don't know that she's going to submit Jessica Andrade if she does, just maul her with size and pace on the ground. So I actually think there are some ways that we turn the narrative again on its head a little bit here, and this thing goes over. Over 2.5 at -170 is a discount in women's MMA. I think Jan is tough enough to hang it out there with Jessica Andrade, and I think Andrade is good enough not to get finished at this stage of her career by Xiaonan. So I will say over. That always is terrifying, though. You get that butthole pucker thing going because Jessica Andrade throws fastballs, and at any point in time, she could catch Yan on the floating rib or something like that, break her, torso and cave her over. So you just never know with that one. I'll say over. I don't know that I'm actually going to have the balls to bet that one, though. Your co-main event is Belal Muhammad taking on Gilly Burns. We do have a 5-round co-main event, which is super exciting because these guys are going to be in the title contender conversation here after this fight. I think it's very, very deserving that we have a 5-round fight here. The total is 4.5. Over 4.5, minus 125. Under 4.5, plus 105. And folks, when you hear the name Belal Muhammad basically equates to this being a dead nuts over fight. Always. Every time, 3 times, twice on Sunday. So I lean to the over 4.5 simply because Belal is involved. However, this is a short notice fight for Belal. This is a quick turnaround for Gilbert Burns. These guys have not overly trained for each other, so it's just going to be kind of throw them in there and see what sticks to the wall in this case. We don't know how prepared they are to go a full 5 rounds because both guys are rolling off the couch. Both guys are coming off of, Gilbert Burns fought very, very recently. Did he go out and party? Did he get right back on the Airdyne? He's a guy that already struggles in the cardio department and is really kind of built for 15 minutes. So can he go a hard 25? I'm not entirely sure. Lots of questions here in this fight. And I've got a sinking sensation that the deeper this fight goes, the more it's going to favor your guy Belal. And even though he's not a super highlight reel type of finisher, Gilbert Burns could be a guy that gasses out deep in this thing. And Gilbert Burns obviously can nuke pretty much anybody. World-class BJJ on the ground. Belal is in no way safe from the offense of Gilbert Burns in this fight. That plus 105 under 4.5, if you talk to me and say that you want to take that number and it makes sense to you, I can't really argue too far back on it. So a total that I'm definitely not willing to jump in pre-flop on. I think I'm just going to kind of watch the total on this one from the sidelines. I've already got a money line position. I don't need to get in on the overs and unders, but the lean is that this fight ends probably deep in the 5th round for me. So that 4.5 is a little bit terrifying. I think they lined it very well. Main event time. Henry Cejudo taking on Aljamain Sterling. We've got another 4.5. The over 4.5 is minus 150. The under 4.5 is plus 130. And I kind of lean with that under. Henry Cejudo, he's a guy that comes out here and he blows the brakes off people. He is so strong. He is so explosive. And I know Aljamain Sterling is kind of a 5-round decision machine at this point. He uses the wrestling. He maintains the distance and the pace. He uses that body lock. He traps people down. But you know what? He's also a whole lot bigger than Henry Cejudo. He's a whole lot more active than Henry Cejudo at this point. And on top of that, you can't sleep on his jiu-jitsu credentials. I'm personally picking Henry Cejudo to win this fight, but all I'm saying is you've got to respect the offense on the other side of the cage when your man is coming off a 3-year layoff. So with all those factors involved, I think Henry is going to come out guns blazing, and that's going to lead to somebody going down. I will be picking Henry. I think it's Henry. I think it's Henry by knockout. But I'm just saying this is not the one where I'm like, the finish only comes from one side. Like, Aljamain Sterling absolutely has the weapons to finish Henry Cejudo if he's not 100%, if he's not fully prepared, if the layoff is too much for him. Those are the types of things that can absolutely get you in trouble with a champion who's essentially in their prime and active. I'll say under 4.5 at plus 130 for the main event. I can't wait for this fight card, folks. Good luck on all your degenerate action. Make sure you tune into my personal YouTube channel for the Fight Exchange a little bit later today. Die Hard MMA on YouTube. And then also check out the Undefeated post-weigh-in show tomorrow. I can't wait for weigh-ins. I can't wait for fights. It's going to be a fun weekend. Good luck, everybody. Let's roll.